Have you ever agreed to something and regretted it almost immediately? A friend asks for a favor. Your manager asks if you can stay a little longer. A family member says they need just one small thing. Before you've even thought about it, you hear yourself say, "Yeah, sure." Then, almost instantly, another thought appears. Why did I say yes? It's a strange feeling. Not because you made the wrong decision, but because it feels like you never really made one at all. Most people think this happens because they're too nice, or because they hate conflict, or because they need to be more confident. But those answers leave a bigger question behind. If saying yes keeps making you stressed, overwhelmed, even resentful, why does your brain keep choosing it? For decades, psychologists have searched for that answer because the mystery isn't that people don't know how to say no. Almost everyone knows the word. The mystery is why, in certain moments, that word suddenly feels impossible to say, as if your brain believes saying no is somehow more dangerous than saying yes. As strange as that sounds, there was a time when it was true. For most of human history, belonging wasn't a luxury. It was survival. Imagine waking up 40,000 years ago. No cities, no supermarkets, no hospitals, no police. Only a small group of people crossing an unpredictable world together. You hunted together. You slept together. You protected one another. Everything depended on the group. Now imagine the group decides you no longer belong. Not because you committed some terrible crime. Maybe you argued too often. Maybe people stopped trusting you. Maybe you simply became difficult to live with. What happens next? You don't just lose company. You lose the people who know where the water is, the people who help hunt, the people watching for predators while you sleep. Alone, your chances of surviving fall dramatically. For hundreds of thousands of years, the humans who stayed connected to their group were simply more likely to stay alive. Evolution didn't reward independence. It rewarded belonging. And generation after generation, your brain became incredibly sensitive to one thing: the possibility of being left outside the circle. That's why rejection feels different from almost every other emotion. It doesn't simply hurt. It lingers. It replays conversations. It makes you wonder whether you said the wrong thing or should have smiled a little more. Because your brain isn't asking, "Did they like me?" It's asking a much older question. Am I still safe? This isn't just a metaphor. In the early 2000s, neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger set out to understand what social rejection actually does to the brain. She asked volunteers to play a simple online ball-tossing game. At first, everyone included them. Then, without warning, the other players stopped throwing them the ball. They acted as if the participant no longer existed. No insults, no threats, no confrontation, just exclusion. Yet, brain scans revealed something remarkable. Some of the same regions involved in processing physical pain became active during that moment of social rejection. Not because rejection and physical injury are identical, but because, throughout most of human history, exclusion often carried real consequences for survival. Your modern brain knows a coworker ignoring your message won't leave you alone in the wilderness, but the older systems underneath still react to the feeling of being pushed outside the group. That's why saying no can feel uncomfortable, even before anything has happened. Your brain isn't responding to today's world. It's responding to one it has been preparing for over thousands of generations. But if that ancient survival system lives inside all of us, why can some people say no without thinking twice, while others feel guilty for days? The answer isn't confidence. It's something much more personal. If fear of rejection were the whole story, everyone would struggle equally, but they don't. Some people decline a request, wish the other person a good day, and never think about it again. Others replay the conversation for hours. Did I sound rude? Should I explain myself? What if they're disappointed? If the same ancient survival brain lives inside all of us, why are our reactions so different? Because survival is only the first layer. The second is identity. Think back to when you were a child. Maybe a teacher smiled and said, "You're such a good helper." Maybe your parents praised you for always sharing. Maybe you learned that being easy to deal with made the adults around you happy. At first, they're just compliments, small moments, easy to forget. But your brain isn't just hearing praise. It's collecting instructions. Little by little, those compliments stop describing what you do. They begin describing who you are. You're not someone who helped. You're the helpful one. You're not someone who's patient. You're the easygoing one. You're not someone who sacrifices sometimes. You're the reliable one. And once your brain accepts an identity, it starts protecting it. Psychologist Robert Cialdini spent years studying why ordinary people agree to requests they never planned to accept. His research pointed to something surprisingly simple. People don't just want to make good decisions. They want to feel consistent with the person they believe they are. Imagine you've spent years telling yourself, I'm always there for people. Now someone asks for another favor. It doesn't feel like a new choice. It feels like a test, not of your schedule, not of your energy, of your identity. Suddenly, saying no feels bigger than refusing a request. It feels like refusing to be yourself. That's why so many people answer before they even stop to think. The real question should be, do I actually want to do this? But another question arrives first. What would someone like me do? And that question is usually answered in an instant, long before logic has a chance to speak. The strange part is, even after you've said yes, even after you know it wasn't what you wanted, your brain still isn't finished. In fact, that's when it begins working the hardest. Not to change your decision, but to convince you it was the right one. Imagine buying something expensive, something you knew you probably shouldn't have bought. As you drive home, a quiet argument begins inside your head. One voice says, that was a mistake. Another answers almost immediately, no, it was worth it. Suddenly, you start noticing all the reasons the purchase made sense. It's better quality. It will last longer. You deserved it. A few minutes earlier, none of those reasons seemed important. Now they feel undeniable. What changed? Not the facts, the story. Psychologist Leon Festinger spent years studying this invisible conflict. He discovered that when our actions and our beliefs don't match, our minds become deeply uncomfortable. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance.
But the name isn't the interesting part. The interesting part is how your brain tries to solve it. Imagine two musicians trying to play different songs at the same time. One says, I value my free time. The other says, I just agreed to spend my entire Saturday helping someone move. Those two ideas can't play together for long. Something has to change. Changing your behavior would mean admitting you made the wrong decision. Changing the story is easier. So your brain quietly begins rewriting the past. They really needed me. It probably won't take that long. I would have felt guilty if I refused. Maybe those things are true, but notice when they appear. Almost always after you've already said yes. It's as if your brain hires a defense lawyer instead of a judge. A judge asks, what actually happened? A lawyer asks, how can I defend what already happened? And your brain is remarkably good at building that defense. That's why people often spend hours doing something they never wanted to do while convincing themselves it was their decision all along. Not because they're dishonest, because protecting a consistent story feels easier than admitting I agreed because I was afraid to disappoint someone. Your brain doesn't like unfinished conflicts. It wants everything to make sense, even if it has to rewrite the reason you acted in the first place. But here's the strange part. If your mind is this good at explaining yesterday, why are you so certain about tomorrow? Why does saying no feel like it will end in disaster before you've ever seen what actually happens? That certainty turns out to be another story your brain loves to tell. Imagine your phone lights up. A coworker needs someone to cover their shift. A friend asks if you can help them move this weekend. A relative wants just one quick favor. You don't want to say yes. Your schedule is already full. You need the time. But before you even consider any of that, your mind starts showing you the future. They'll think I'm selfish. Things will be awkward. Maybe they'll stop liking me. Maybe this will change our relationship. Notice something. None of it has happened. It's only a prediction. Yet your body reacts as if it's already real. Your chest tightens. Your stomach sinks. And suddenly, saying yes feels like the safest option. Psychologists have a name for this mistake: affective forecasting. It describes our tendency to predict how future events will make us feel. The problem is, we're surprisingly bad at it. Researchers Daniel Gilbert and Timothy Wilson found that people consistently overestimate how painful negative experiences will be and how long those feelings will last. We expect embarrassment to linger, rejection to leave permanent scars, one uncomfortable conversation to damage an entire relationship. Most of the time, none of that happens. Your brain is is running a simulation, but it's using software designed for a completely different world. Thousands of years ago, expecting the worst often kept you alive. Today, that same system treats an awkward text message like a life or death event. It zooms in on one possible future, the disappointed face, the uncomfortable silence, the guilty feeling. What it almost never shows you is the much more common ending. The person who says, "No problem." The coworker who simply asks someone else. The friend who understands. The relationship that stays exactly the same. Or something even better, the respect people often have for someone who sets honest boundaries instead of making promises they'll quietly resent. Your survival brain isn't trying to predict the future. It's trying to eliminate risk. Those aren't the same thing. So the next time you feel certain that saying no will end badly, ask yourself one question. Is this a memory or is it a prediction? That single question creates something powerful: distance. Instead of treating every anxious thought like a fact, you begin seeing it for what it really is, a guess. And once you realize your brain can be wrong about the future, only one question remains. If your survival brain, your identity, your inner storyteller, and your fear of tomorrow have all been speaking for you, who has been making your decisions all this time?